Preparing your materials. Fabric for weaving. Cut 1 cm strips of your fabric. Tear the fabric all the way to the end. Don't be scared to rip the fabric. Then remove any loose threads. Tying yarn to achieve a resist dyed pattern. Tie a bow in the yarn by creating a loop, wrapping the loop around your fingers, pulling the loop through the hole, but not all the way. Continue tying bows until you reach the end of the yarn, tying bows every 30 to 40 centimeters along your yarn. Preparing your dye pot. Prepare a dye pot by placing 1 tablespoon of your chosen ground spice in 2 liters of water and stir. Bring to the boil. Once the water is boiling, add your desired materials and stir again, making sure the materials are completely covered by the dye. Take off the heat after 5 minutes and leave to dye overnight. Pour the entire dye bath and materials into the sink. Rinse under warm water until the water runs clear, then hang to dry. How to set up your loom. Make sure you have all the necessary equipment: frame loom, yarn and scissors, as well as your rotating heddle bar. Start by placing your heddle bar onto your frame loom. Take your yarn and tie it in a double knot in the left bottom corner of your frame loom. Make sure the yarn is in the left indent. Once you've tied a knot, it's time to start warping your frame loom. Take the yarn that is tied onto the loom, pass it through the rotating heddle bar in the left indent, pass it through the loom left indent at the top left of your loom, wrap it around and through the second indent, and head back down to the bottom, passing again through your heddle loom, leaving 1 indent gap. Continue this warping method until you reach the right side of your loom, stopping in the 3rd last indent at the bottom of your frame. Follow the video by warping up through the 2nd indent, back down through the bottom right indent, and back up again through the 3rd indent. Starting again your warping, heading backwards to the left. As you warp back to the left side of your loom, pass your thread through the heddle bar in the opposite spaces as previous. Continue until you reach the left indent again. Cut the yarn, leaving an extra 20 centimeters. Tie off the same way you tied onto the loom, using a double knot. Well done, your loom is nearly ready for weaving. Follow the video by turning the screws to the left and turning the loom bar towards you, tightening the warp thread. Tighten the screws after you have completed this. Complete this process on the other end of the loom, ensuring the warp thread is pulled tight. Congratulations, your loom is ready. How to plain weave. Start by wrapping your fabric strip or yarn around the length of your weaving rod. Turn your heddle bar towards you and insert the rod on the side of the loom where the warp thread is down. Pass the shuttle rod all the way through to the other side of the loom. Flatten out your fabric strip and pull it down to the base of the loom. On the side where you began weaving, leave roughly 15 centimeters of fabric. Turn your heddle bar the opposite way, shifting your warp threads. Manually weave the loose end of your fabric strip through a few warp threads. Pull the strip firmly and push through to the back of the loom. Using your comb, beat down the fabric strips towards yourself, creating the beginning of your woven fabric. As you've already turned your heddle bar, you do not need to turn it again. Pass the shuttle back through the warp threads to the other side. Pull your heddle bar closer to you to make it easier. Pull the fabric strip all the way through, ensuring not to pull too tight, otherwise you'll change the shape of your woven fabric. Continue this process until the end of the fabric strip, beating down the fabric with your comb each time the shuttle has passed through the warp threads. With the end of your fabric strip, repeat the same process as when you started, by turning the heddle bar and manually weaving through the strip, tucking through into the back and pulling tight, and beating down. Continue this process until you cannot add any more fabric strips. How to add texture using knots. Make sure you have your completed weave, scissors, large needle and yarn. Take 2 pieces of yarn and thread them from the back to the front in the place you wish to create the knot. Pull them all the way through. Thread the yarn back through the woven fabric, 3 warp threads across to the right. Once you have pulled these threads through, cut about 15 centimeters, making all threads even. Now you have 4 even length threads. Pass them back through to the front of the fabric, up 1 weft thread, as you can see in the video. Once you have pulled the threads through to the front, pull out your loop so that these threads can go down through the loop. Pull the threads down tightly. Continue this process in every place that you want a knot. How to plait weave. Take a strip of fabric and weave it under the right warp thread. Take a second strip of fabric and tie a double knot around this first strip of fabric. Separate your two pieces of fabric, the one woven underneath the warp thread at the top and the second piece below. Take the bottom strip of fabric and weave it over the top of the first piece of fabric. Pull this thread tight and re-separate your pieces of fabric. Repeat this plaiting process with the new bottom piece of fabric, weaving it under now the fifth warp thread. Continue this plaiting method until you reach the final warp thread. Tie the two strips of fabric in a double knot to tie off the plait. Using the comb, softly beat down the plait into place. How to tie off your weaving. Pull the left 4 warp threads off the loom. Cut them in half by making them even lengths. Tie each pair together, matching the left 2 together and the right 2. Continue this process until all warp threads have been tied off. Turn the loom around. Take the left 2 warp threads off the loom. This loop will be double the length, and you will need to wrap it twice around the bar. Continue taking the warp threads off the loom and sliding them onto the bar. Continue this process until you have reached the final warp threads. For the final loop, you will need to cut the warp threads in half off the loom. You will need to tie these 2 warp threads around the bar in a double knot. How to coil. Make sure you have all necessary equipment: rope or material strips, yarn, scissors and a needle. Thread the needle and tie a double knot at the other end of the yarn. Trim the end of the rope or your material strip. Pass the needle through the inside of the rope and out the side. Begin to coil the end of the rope or material by rolling it in on itself. Pass the yarn around the outside and up through the center using a needle. Repeat this step 4 to 5 times until the beginning of your coil is secure. Repeat the same process, but head back to where you started, trying to cover as much of the rope or material as possible. This should be the end result of step 3. Hold the coil facing away from you with the yarn coming out the top. Continue coiling, passing the yarn towards you, around the rope or material, and back up the center. When passing the needle through the center, go through the rope or material too. Continue this process until you have reached back where you started. After reaching where you started, continue coiling, passing the needle through the rope or material to the left of the yarn below it. This is to ensure an even pattern is achieved. Continue coiling until your piece of yarn has almost run out. To tie off your first piece of yarn, pass it along under the rope and tie a double knot. Once you have tied your double knot, pass the yarn again along under the rope or material and trim the end. You may have to put the needle through first. To tie on a new piece of yarn, pass the yarn under the rope in the opposite direction to how you tied off. Pull the yarn all the way through and tie a knot at the end. Tuck the knot inside the coiling and continue to coil as normal. Shape the coiling by moving the rope or material where desired. You can coil flat, up on an angle, or straight upwards. When coiling straight upwards, you may need to pass the needle through more of the rope or material to make sure it is secure. To tie off at the end, coil very close together. Tying off is very similar to the beginning. Coil as close as you can to cover as much of the rope and material as possible.